Right. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have all of you here. It's very exciting to see so many of you coming back, and it is really meaningful to us. I'm Tao Wang, Priest Chair of Arts of Asia and Executive Director of Initiatives in Asia. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first program for the exhibition opening yesterday, Radical Clay, Contemporary Women Artists from Japan. The exhibition is curated by Janice Katz, the Roger Weston Associate Curator of Japanese Art at the Art Institute. Janice is, I'm sure she doesn't need much introduction, and she's a vital member of the museum and the Steward of Japanese collections. She introduced audience to Japanese artists through quarterly print rotations, you're well known, and in the Gallery 107. And she also curated a number of major exhibitions, including 2018 painting, The Floating Word, ukiyo-e masterpieces from the Weston collection. The current exhibition, Radical Clay, features 36 contemporary ceramic artists, all women, who define gender-imposed constraints through groundbreaking, ambitious, and unconventional work in clay. On behalf of all of us at the Art Institute, I want to especially thank Carol and Jeffrey Hovis. All 40 pieces in the exhibition are from their exemplary collection, and we are honored to share those artists and their works with a global audience. I'm delighted to share that both Carol and Jeffrey are here with us today. And please join me in welcoming Jeffrey to the stage. Just to share a few words and maybe some stories about the collection of they built up over the decades. Jeffrey, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I will say just a few words, which is not my norm. Actually, first, Carol, can you just stand up so people can see who you are? She is the originator of the idea in the show. The pieces are very carefully selected from our collection of Japanese contemporary ceramics, meaning really from about 1950 to yesterday, of about 1,500 pieces. If you wonder why it's the largest, don't ask. That's a long story. But it's the largest such collection outside of Japan, public or private, and it's used primarily for public purposes, loaning gifts, exhibitions among more than 30 US museums. I want to just sort of briefly tell you a little bit about what we do and our relationship to the artist and what we've seen. We started collecting in 2008, very, very modestly, although we did have a collection policy being experienced with other collections. We've been to Japan, I think 7 times, averaging about 2 weeks each, primarily to see the best available ceramic artists and to see dealers primarily in Tokyo and Kyoto, but also out in the middle of nowhere sometimes. To understand the artist is actually not that difficult. They are remarkably normal in the main. The exception might be Mishima Kimyo, who is, I think, well into her 80s and is quite diminutive. She and I have gone through exhibitions together. She doesn't speak English, I don't speak Japanese, and we have absolutely clear communication, and she can eat and drink me under the table. What we found in talking to the artists is while they are normal in their personal lives, they are essentially exceptional in their skills and their motivation and their vision. As a group, the Japanese ceramic artists, certainly in the contemporary field, are the finest group in the world. There's some 300 of them, male and female, that are kind of at the top of the profession in the world. So it's the largest concentration thereof. And the tradition of ceramics in Japan, of course, is fundamental to all the art forms in Japan. It's called craft even there, variously kogai or different words depending on context, but in fact, it is seen as an art form. One of the things about the exhibition is all the works are by women. Now, if you go in there and look at them, I would suggest to you that you not think of them as being done by women, because there's nothing about them that tells you that they're feminine. And when we go to visit them, most of the women from the successive generations, some who are literally pioneers for women in the contemporary field, are people who don't see themselves as female artists, they see themselves as artists. They are all dead serious about their work, but their lives are relatively normal. The first generation are people now in their 70s, 80s, and probably even approaching 90. Sabui actually did not live quite long enough for the opening exhibition, and their experiences were more difficult. We heard on our last trip that today, this may be off-putting to those who think that this is highly special, but 70% of the graduate students in the Department of Ceramics now may be female. That is an extraordinary change. I'm not sure we played a major part. Our major role in this is exposing the work of these people to a world outside of Japan. And in Japan, they are less appreciated, generally speaking, than here and in Europe. Many of them, of what I'll call the intermediate generation that we've known, have actually either moved or working in Europe, primarily London and Paris. They see themselves as international, and yet there's always a part of it that is Japanese. One of the experiences we had was seeing Akiyama Yo and his wife Kitamura Junko. So you'll see both a piece by Kitamura Junko in the exhibition. It's the dark bowl with little white dots all over it. Those are done freehand. I was astonished to see it. They have a nice studio that they built for themselves outside of Tokyo. And if you need to see an Akiyama Yo, if you go to the atrium, we've gifted one of the two largest pieces in America by the foremost sculptor ceramicist in Japan, and that's her husband. The two could not be more different. And we've seen this before. Many of the artists that are represented in the collection are artists who are married to other ceramic artists, and their works are mostly polar opposites. It's quite something to see. We saw a demo of Akiyama Yo and Kitamura Junko together. There's a certain amount of tension between the two, as his work is powerful, earthy, sort of tortured. Hers is meticulous, obsessive. And you'll also see with some of the artists this obsessiveness where process and product are not distinguishable. And there's a long tradition in Japan about that. So generally speaking, I think I would sort of urge you to first look at the material in the exhibition as just the objects, not gender specific. You won't really be able to discern correctly the gender anyway. One of the other things we do, though, when we go to Japan is, especially for the younger and early mid-career artists, we try to support them by encouraging them to do more major work, and one of the ways we encourage that is by purchasing it. So for Tanaka Yu, one of the most popular ceramic artists in Japan right now, the yellow wrapped cloth simulacrum, I think we purchased almost the entirety of her yearly production of large pieces to give to museums, all of whom want them. And we've tried to do, certainly we were an early patron for Fujikasa, who on our second visit, we didn't actually know her the first visit. The second visit, I'm talking to her, she's got a back brace on, she doesn't have enough money for a sculpture table to raise it and lower it. She doesn't yet have children, and she tells me through a translator that, well, she thinks she's got a fiance, she's going to get married, have babies, and maybe she'll stop doing ceramics. I just looked at her and said, no, you're not. Fast forward to the next trip, her husband, who was an artist himself, took a real paying job and is supporting her, and she's a superstar. Although the first child hangs on her leg, making it kind of hard to deal with the relatively soft clay that she's forming on an armature. So every story is different. I could do this for 3 hours and tell you all sorts of stories about our interactions with the artists. We actually physically met more than half maybe of the artists in the show, often at their place. Their homes and studios are often the same, but not always. We've also met them, though, at some other gallery or space they've rented because they live in very small spaces and they don't have a space to show, even in their own studios. And they're I think they're a little bit embarrassed. And it's normal in Japan, even for business dinners and so forth, to entertain outside the home. But we've also had some of the artists, some of the most major living artists, come to the house. We have 1,500 square feet of display space in a very large house, happened to be built by the widow of the partner Marshall Fields. And that is sort of the short version of our many, many, many days in Japan. So I hope you enjoy the show. Carol and I will probably be able to be in the gallery after the talk. If any of you want to chat about things or hear stories or just look with us, we're more than happy to do that. So I'm going to turn this over to Janice, who will actually tell you something about the material, actually quite a lot of things about the material and the artists.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Tao, and thank you so much, Jeffrey. It is great to have you and Carol with us, and it has been such a pleasure to research and display the works in your collection for this exhibition, and I'm especially glad that we could hear from you today. Collectors are often behind the scenes, but they are vitally important. And as you heard, they can directly encourage artists, take them from obscurity into the limelight, contextualize their work within collections, and bring the artist to the attention of curators like me. I have learned and continue to learn so much from you and Carol, and we all benefit from your knowledge and enthusiasm in sharing the work of these artists with us in Chicago. As Tao mentioned, all of the works in the exhibition are selected from the Horvitz's extensive collection of contemporary ceramics. And as Jeffrey mentioned, it is the largest collection of such material outside of Japan. I'm thrilled to be speaking to you on the occasion of the opening of the exhibition Radical Clay at the Art Institute of Chicago. And while contemporary ceramics are not my main area of focus within Japanese art, when presented with the opportunity, we quickly realized that this exhibition would align not only with what the Art Institute has been doing for decades, that is bringing the newest wave of contemporary Japanese ceramics to an American audience, but also that it was the right time for us to focus on women artists as their work continues to fulfill its potential as cutting-edge contemporary art. There have been shows of women artists before, not enough, but they have been done and done well. As Carol recently stated, our exhibition is walking through the door opened by previous shows, and I love that phrase so much. So what is different about our presentation? First of all, the Art Institute has a solid history of being at the forefront of contemporary art, and particularly Japanese contemporary art, as I'll explain in a minute. Also, as a museum showcasing artwork from around the globe, we can situate these artist creations to foster a dialogue with contemporary art the world over in a large public city museum. And I'm showing you here some installation photos within the gallery created by Japanese architect Ando Tadao, which is one of 2 galleries of the exhibition. And in the center here, that large piece over there, you can see expanding outward like a rotating tornado is Fujikasa Satoku's Seraphim. And it is one of the revelations of the show, in my opinion. Also, as a group, these artists have a vision beyond what others are doing in the field. They're far less interested in and bound by tradition than many contemporary ceramicists at work in Japan. This can perhaps be said to be the result of their training, either at prestigious art academies or abroad, not as apprentices at established kilns. And this ability to innovate, to invent new ways of working with clay and glaze, and the skill of each artist to carve out their strength and unique process is what makes these works so awe-inspiring and unusual. When you think of Japanese ceramics, I bet for most of you, you do not envision anything like this. Nothing like this comes to mind. And here I'm showing you Tomita Mikiko's Form of the Progenitor in the foreground, with its jewel-like embossed, overglazed enamel porcelain with gold elements. Let me say that again. It's embossed, overglazed enamel porcelain. Just that alone is technically incredible. I had to have it, of course, in the center of the gallery to greet you as you walk in. And to get a bit more granular, within the works in the exhibition, there's a strong focus on surface, whether shiny or matte, and a focus on representations of the body, as in Oishi Sayaka's Hiding Apple Skull, which you see on the left, and Matsuda Yuriko's In Her Shoes. There's also, which is the leg, or boot, as it were. There's also a strain of the strange or the creepy, the grotesque throughout the exhibition, the pinnacle of which is Kawaura Saki's Looking for a Crush that seems to be a bloody heart. And the last point I want to make about our presentation in general is that it features artists of several generations from the 1970s to today. Many of the younger artists are just making a name for themselves. There are artists who've not been included in museum exhibitions before, and these artists' work cannot be seen in too many places, especially outside of Japan, yet. Kawaura Saki is one such artist. Historically, women have largely been kept apart from the creative process of ceramics, and when they were involved, had certain supporting roles, such as preparing the clay, preparing the glazes, or as kiln managers for their husbands or fathers. There are exceptions, of course, historically, but they are few. While long a center for contemporary Japanese art, the Art Institute is typical among comparable institutions in that it has rarely included women artists within its exhibitions and acquisitions. In the 1950s and 1960s, exhibitions of the work of contemporary ceramic artists were held here that featured male Japanese artists working in traditional modes. This continued even into the 1980s. A large traveling exhibition of contemporary makers from Japan, the Living National Treasures of Japan exhibition, was held at the Art Institute in 1983 as one of its many stops, and it featured no women at all, highlighting the exclusionary nature of government-sponsored Living National Treasure designation process. Indeed, the criteria for selecting a living national treasure in Japan favors artists who have been trained in traditional methods through an apprentice system that has largely been closed to women. To this day, no woman has been designated a living national treasure in the field of ceramics. However, women now, as Jeffrey mentioned, are in the majority at academic ceramic art programs. They win prestigious awards and commissions. They have many solo shows and retrospectives, and they are certainly no longer in the shadows. In Japan, there have actually been decades of activity by women ceramic artists. The Joryu Toge, which translates to Women's Association of Ceramic Art, formed in 1957 and was spearheaded by Tsuboi Asuka, an artist included in this exhibition. And that association is still thriving today, now in its 56th exhibition. And in the 1980s, a group that came to be known as Cho Shoujo, Supergirls, was creating large installation works that were garnering much attention. This group included the artist Tashima Etsuko, an artist who is also featured in Radical Clay. And here I'm showing you an installation from 1987 called Hip Island. She is currently professor of ceramics at the Osaka University of the Arts, a very prestigious position. Japanese ceramics displayed in American museums and the avant-garde work then being made by Japanese ceramic artists, many of them women, could not have been further apart in the 1980s. And I believe Radical Clay definitively brings these two worlds in step with one another. Unfortunately, I can't talk about every one of the 36 amazing artists in the exhibition, each one so worthy of their own exhibition. But let me highlight just a few, and along the way, point out how each exemplifies certain characteristics, threads that repeat and connect this group of artists. And I'll also show you aspects of their work that you can't see in the exhibition. In creating this show, it was very important to have the artists speak for themselves. So you'll notice that the labels are filled with quotes. And today I have videos made by the artists to show you. And at the end of the talk, I'll mention some opportunities to hear from the artists themselves directly through our related exhibition programming. So let's start with Mishima Kimio, who Jeffrey mentioned, who, although is very unique in the way she entered the ceramics field, is one of the earliest and most successful to do so. There's a wonderful essay by Hollis Goodall, who just retired from the LA County Museum, in the exhibition catalog that's devoted entirely to this artist. Mishima's work focuses on garbage, the variety of things that have been thrown away by people in the most developed societies, particularly newspapers or other items that have text. Here, a larger-than-life garbage can filled with crumpled newspapers, all ceramic, stands in Japan's Center for Contemporary Art, the island of Naoshima. In the 1960s, she was affiliated with the Gutai movement, as was her husband, a movement known to many of you that emphasized movement and process across media. The Art Institute actually acquired this collage, two-dimensional collage by her, as part of its focus on Gutai in 2017, before the current ceramic show was conceived. There are bits of newspaper in this mixed media work made in 1965, which is one link to her later work in ceramics. In the current exhibition, we have two works by Mishima showcasing her signature method of silk screening text and images onto clay to create lifelike representations of trash, a technique she began in 1971. Again, just marveling at the technique, silk screening these graphics, including text, readable text, onto clay. That alone is incredibly difficult her knowledge of silk screening, but also how she has to prepare the clay to have the exact right amount of hardness, catching it at the right point in its drying, creating the slabs to receive the silk screen. All of it is technically amazing. She was drawn to the brittle nature of ceramics to create her sculptures of transient trash. The wadded French newspaper I'm showing you on the left, 1981, is readable. It contains articles about the nuclear arms race, among other things, and it's like a diary of that particular day and time. You have one sheet of newspaper that's added to the front and back of the clay slab. It's the same sheet of the newspaper, which is then shaped. The larger work from 2007 is a smashed cardboard box of beer with newspapers spilling out, all the surfaces covered with text and information. For years, her work suffered from being uncategorizable. Is it ceramics? Is it sculpture? Is she a potter? Is she not a potter? She says that only recently, particularly since 2015, that's when she started to have a steady income, not before. Another artist, Ogawa Machiko, is also celebrated. She's been active for decades. She is an interesting contrast to Mishima, since she and her work are categorizable, being based on the celebrated Japanese practice wherein the primacy of the material, the clay, is her starting point. Her works are sculpture, though they often have a practical form at their origin and can look like vessels, some more than others. Sometimes they're even titled as vessels, as this one is. This work in the exhibition exemplifies her recent work of creating hand-built clam or basin-like forms out of giant ripped slabs of clay that have glaze poured on them to form what looks like a geological kind of sulfuric pool. By contrast, in art school, she was trained on the potter's wheel. She writes that of the 60 students who entered the craft division of Tokyo Geidai, which is the most prestigious art academy in Japan every year, she was one of the few women. But steadily after her, more and more specialized in ceramics, while the men chose industrial design. Like many in her generation, her career trajectory was marked by sacrifices for her family, which shaped her career. She joined her husband in France and then Africa for his work in the 1970s. And in Burkina Faso, she learned how to create clay molds and enjoyed the immediacy of searching for clay and firing outdoors. Like many artists, she also creates large room-scale installations, and here I'm showing you a work from 2019. You can see the pools of glaze and glass at the bottom of each cylindrical form. She has many styles to her work, however, and here I'm showing you one of her red vessels, inspired by the color of ancient terracotta pots. She applies red iron oxide glaze and rubs it into the clay surface directly, so it appears as if the clay is red, not as if it's covered in red glaze. So you don't just have clay and then glaze that covers it, but it's how the glaze is applied and how the clay is worked that makes her work, as well as the others, so exceptional. Another major artist represented by two works in the exhibition is Katsumata Chieko. Her intensely colored large pumpkins evoke a life force and sensuousness, but also danger, especially in the case of the one with the yawning red-tinged mouth. This interest in nature, but also the gruesome side of it, is something we'll see very much at play in the work of the younger generation of artists later on. She studied and worked almost entirely in France in the 1970s, moving back to Japan towards the end of that decade when she was in her 50s. Her vegetal works are hand-built using shigaraki clay, and like many of the artists in this exhibition, it is her deft handling of materials and pioneering techniques that give them their singular appearance. She applies her colors through a thin piece of cloth, and the modeled, soft-looking surface is the result of many firings, sandings, and layers of color. Her works are fascinating both in form, color, texture, and concept. I just love this really zoomed-in detail where you can see that soft texture. Another artist whose work is very much about a kind of surface that only she can create is Kishieko. In this work of 2017, we see her signature saiseki zogan technique, which is colored stone inlay, of her own invention, which she uses on geometric forms, geometric sculptural forms. She's inspired by textiles and is, in a way, creating her own textile in clay. Actually, one can go through the exhibition with textiles in mind and see how many different artists evoke cloth and textiles in their work. Before I show you a short five-minute video of her process, let me quote Joe Earle's description of her technique, since he's done such a wonderful job of explaining it in the catalog. She kneads together more than a dozen multicolored clays and uses them to build faceted, dynamic geometric forms that, when cut, reveal numerous hidden lines of contrasting hues, primarily pale blue. While the body is still damp, she striates and digs into the surface of the clay with knives and needles, making thousands of small holes that she fills with colored slip before spraying on a thin, transparent glaze prior to firing. So let's watch her do that.
土は信楽の土を使っています。一般に市販されているものですが、この信楽の白い土に顔料を混ぜて、で10種類以上の色土を作ってシャモットにしています。こうやってできたカラーシャモットを土に混ぜるんですけれども、全体の土の半分以上入れるので、とても粗くて粘り気のない土になり、成形しにくいという特徴があります。土で作品を作るときに、形のほかに質感だとか肌合いだとかで色合いやとか文様を作り出すことができるので、そのためにはこの粗い土で作ると私の思うところの作品になって、いい結果につながるんじゃないかと考えているんです。だいたいイメージで形が浮かんで、それをこうミニチュアルにして でこうやってこの間見せましたようにこう大きく伸ばしていくんですけどね、その形は今すごく私ちょっとお能をしてたのでもう今ちょっとあんまり忙しくてやめてるんだけど、そのお能の踊ってる形待ってる瞬間をそれを抽象化して形に表していることをこの本当に 1,2 年ずっとやってます。こう分かりやすい色っていうのが嫌いなんだけど、カラフルが嫌いなんだけどカラフルが好きなんです。だから本当に一色にあんまり色が見えないな思うけど、よくよく見ればすごくいろんな色によって構成されてるみたいなね、それはすごく深みがあるように自分で感じるんです。
Great. Amazing. I guess you need a lot of different kinds of footwear to be a ceramic artist. One of the most radical creations, I think, in radical clay is this work entitled Liberation by Konno Tomoko. She creates complex sculptures that look like oversized vegetation, or in this case, a plant creature that appears as if it's going to get up and walk away. It sits on just a few points, its leaves or feet, and had to be assembled on site. Thankfully, we had detailed instructions and very steady hands. The marbleized clay, a technique known as nerikomi, forms some of the complexity here, as well as the stamen covered with small bits of multicolored clays worked into a kind of mosaic. The tendrils are each hand-formed and placed. It would be understandable to say that her time in Bali, where she worked for 3 years, had an enormous impact on her, both the flora and the colors. This work was especially commissioned by the Horvitzes for the exhibition, and we had thought that originally the title would be Creature, since she had named some of her works that before. But to our surprise, when we learned the title of this piece, it was Liberation, which was so curious. So when I asked the artist about this, she provided some explanation by saying that it referred to the freedom that she felt through its creation. The artist plans to be here during the course of the exhibition, so I'm going to ask her about the title again. And please stay tuned for some programming around her visit, and I really hope that she'll do a demonstration workshop for us. Here are a few more examples of her work. These are much smaller works, which are much more typical of her. I think this piece in Radical Clay is it the largest piece that she's, yes, the largest piece that she's ever created. Yet another artist who is trained abroad is Hosono Hitomi. Her works have established her among global ceramic movements and in international exhibitions more than any other artist in the current exhibition. She lives in London and finds her botanical inspiration during her walks. By meticulously shaping and grouping additions to a clay base, She creates works that resemble a dense covering of leaves on a forest floor. She began exploring molding techniques, porcelain molding techniques, while at Wedgwood. And let's watch this short 5-minute video to see exactly how she does it.
Nature is a very important part of my life. I am interested in microscopic detail of plants. By looking very closely, I found really beautiful details which I can use for my work. My name is Hitomi Hosono. I am a ceramic artist working in London. I was looking at a massive hawthorn tree in Britain. It was really massive, but have a tiny flowers. I thought it's beautiful, and this coexistence of a small, delicate element and also big scale of the tree is wonderful, I thought. I wish to express this feeling with a porcelain piece. I really love to make something which is essentially from us. When bag of clay arrives in studio, it's lifeless. But there is excitement going through the process. The clay starts taking its shape, and that is really exciting for me. Making something porcelain is frustrating if we don't know how to handle it. Porcelain is a very sensitive and delicate material, and if I rush, the porcelain might crack. But once we get the hang of it, it could be very therapeutic. Every day sometimes could be repetitive, but it's like the therapeutic and meditative. As I touch the material, more memory comes back through hand. And I remember in Gifu Prefecture in Japan, there are lots of rice fields, and in the hot summer night, thousands of frogs singing, and also the sound of rustling rice leaves fill the air. When I'm working in porcelain, this beautiful sound, I hear as if I was in Japan. It might take 1 month to complete one sprig model. Afterwards, I made negative mold. Then I put the porcelain clay inside of the mold, made 1,000 leaves from it, and then carve finer detail with modified dentist tools. I get a thrown piece from potter's wheel. Then I apply these leaves on the shape. Almost looks like the leaves obscuring the branches. Then I dry very slowly, sometimes takes 6-7 months. And then some of the vessels I gill inside with fine gold leaf. Then it's finished. Sometimes whole process takes 1.5 years. This needs patience. So I made this quietly at the studio. Basically, this piece audience was only me for 2 years. But now the piece could be seen by a lot of people in Tefaf. I feel really grateful and excited. We Japanese have this phrase, Seishin ga yadoru. Seishin means spirit, yadoru means home. I believe each plant, each tree flowers have a seishin, almost like us. They can think, they can feel. So when I'm making the porcelain piece inspired by nature, I feel this spirit seishin exists in my piece. So this way, I also have this respect to the piece. That's the attitude I have to the nature. 精神が宿る。
So one of the younger artists in the exhibition is also one of the most conceptual, playing with traditional subject matter. Her clay sculptures, often entitled bagwork, appear to be brightly colored textiles wrapped around vessels or boxes, which point to the centuries-old practice in Japan of wrapping treasured items, usually ceramics themselves or tea bowls, in cloth. Tanaka creates the illusion of fabric by using sponges to smooth her coil-built forms, applying clay slip with a brush or airbrush, and adding up to several layers of glaze. I've gotten asked the question, oh, does she use a mold to create these shapes? Nope, entirely hand-built. The beauty of the forms, the soft-looking folds within which the color is more saturated, is incredibly beautiful up close. But I also love how the sculpture is representational of objects that are not clay. And bringing with it is this notion of a precious or concealed treasure. And with that, I think we've come kind of full circle from the garbage sculptures of Mishima Kimiyo to an artist of the younger generation also creating works in clay that defy the appearance of the medium. But I can't close without showing you the work of the youngest artist in the exhibition that graces the exhibition catalog cover. This is Shura by Yamaguchi Mio. During the photo shoot for the catalog this year, this work so impressed us with its texture and color that we decided to feature it on the cover of the catalog. It looks like scales on some underwater rock formation, and the pale blue glaze covers the clay inconsistently, like slime or moss. It's just beautiful. Discussing this work, Yamaguchi explains that Shura is a Buddhist deity. In Japanese, the word is used to express intense emotions. When I created this piece, I had big, strong emotions. I wove those emotions into the clay. It's certainly one of the highlights of the exhibition for me, but I think I've probably said that about a lot of the pieces that I showed. There are a lot of highlights. So I'm absolutely thrilled that Yamaguchi Mio and Hosono Hitomi will be joining us in person for a panel discussion with myself and Joe Earl, the catalog editor, on March 23rd next year. And I hope you can join us for what promises to be a very interesting discussion. Each creation is so spectacular, each artist's process and style is so their own, that I encourage you to visit the exhibition more than once over its 6-month run, as well as join us for the programming to hear from the artists directly. And I would be happy to take questions and ask that Jeffrey Horvitz join me on stage in case there's any questions that he's better able to answer for you. And please raise your hand and staff will bring a microphone to you if you have a question.
Feel free to ask any questions about any aspect of this or the background of it or the collecting, whatever you like. If I don't know the answer, I'll just make it up.
Me too.
No takers?
No, we've got one over there. She's waiting for her mic.
Hello.
Hi.
I was able to see this exhibition this morning, and one of the overwhelming questions that I had was, all of these pieces are large and very seemingly delicate. Could one of you speak to the transport process of these incredible pieces?
The transport, the shipping, they're so delicate.
So, how many of you have nightmares? This is actually one of the huge challenges of doing these exhibitions and then moving them around. Many of the works are fragile. COVID had really done a number on the major art shipping companies that let go a lot of their most experienced staff, and only now are they sort of restaffing adequately. It's very hard to pack these. In Japan, the packing is an art form itself. It's quite expensive to do, but each time you take something out, it can be a problem. One of the main problems is actually not the shipping itself, it's taking it out of the crate, and it's particularly sensitive for artists that use very, very low firing, where the tensile strength of the clay is really not very high. And that's fairly common now with some of the major artists, male and female. Curator, who's probably the leading figure making plant-like sculptures. But also you'll see the plant forms too, where, especially when there's two types of clay in it, then you really have a problem because part of it's very strong, part of it is actually quite weak. And then there's other types where you think it's weak, but it's not weak. One of my functions in the house is I reinstall our 1,500 square feet of gallery, so I'm really familiar with this. I don't think I've broken much, although once I did chip something.
Thank you. Yes, we have a whole department of registrars who were very involved along with the shippers and the warehouse that the pieces came from in making sure that the packing was adequate. And the show is going to travel to other venues, and so we're creating packing and crates so that the pieces will be safe as they go around the country, and hopefully come back just as pristine as when they left. Are there any other questions? I think there's one in the middle over there.
Hey, Jeff and Carol, thank you so much for the artwork. And how did you become so interested in specifically ceramics from Japan? It seems like such a niche to me.
I think that's for you. How did you become interested in ceramics from Japan?
So, the story I've actually told people often. Carol has this, first of all, she likes three-dimensional things. And what you probably don't know about is the other collection, the French collection, which is primarily paintings and drawings which are two-dimensional. You'll actually see some of it here next fall with a show of French art from 1770 to 1830, which is actually even larger than the Japanese collection. But basically what she does is she finds something of interest, particularly Asian art, which she loves, and then she'll buy me a present. And it's a bit like fishing, where if the fish don't bite the first lure, try a different lure. So I was actually deaccessioning by half gift and half sale of my former Italian drawing, old master drawing collection. And so she bought me a present. This was January 2008. It couldn't have been 2 weeks later that we are having lunch with Joan Mervis, or the preeminent dealer in New York, and she's showing me Japanese contemporary ceramics. So we ended up having lunch with Joan and setting out a collection policy and sort of a strategic, simplified vision of what to do. I've been an art dealer in my misspent youth. I've been a museum trustee, actually the Boston MFA, a dealer in 20th century and contemporary Western, European and American art. So I sort of know most of the parts. And I said, if we're going to do this, let's do it seriously. I didn't mean this seriously. And one thing led to another, and it's actually one of the great bargains in the art world, one of the few bargains in the art world. For what you get, there's almost nothing that is such good value. So the other way to think of it is, I explained at a talk decades ago at Harvard, having to do with the drawing collection, it's like going to the pet store, buying 2 gerbils and forgetting to ask what the sex is. Next thing you have 4 gerbils, then you have 8 gerbils, then you have 16 gerbils. But then we started to see the grander purpose. And our purpose is to expose really the greatest cluster of modern contemporary ceramic art in the world to a much broader audience. And that audience, Carol thinks, has It certainly broached 500,000 people, probably across 30 to 40 museums, that have not seen this material. Everyone who sees it, even if you know absolutely nothing about it, you're just taken by it. And so the collection is not just a normal collecting activity, it's pathological, but it is a collecting activity for a purpose. And I've talked about Carol as being the Johnny Appleseed of Japanese ceramics in America.
Well, I've never thought of ceramics like gerbils, but now I will. Thank you. If there are, there's one more question I see in the back.
And this will be our last question of the afternoon.
Are these artists well accepted and received in Japan itself, especially them being women?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to answer that? Are these artists accepted in Japan?
The what?
Are they accepted in Japan as being women?
It's getting better. Japan, it's a very strange market. And it's not strange to them, of course, but it's still very much a traditional market, but also constrained by scale. The homes are actually quite small, and there are many ceramic museums, but in terms of the women themselves, it's ramping up so rapidly, and yet this type of exhibition, this will go a long way, because the Japanese market often looks to the US and to Europe, but even more to the US for validation. So some of the artists involved in this we thought were great. Well, we know they're great. Fujikasa being one of them, Tanaka Yu another. So we've helped them by establishing a resume very, very fast, by buying a lot of work, a lot is a relative term, and having it in museums. That helps validate their CV. That gives them credibility in Japan. And this exhibition is going to go a very long way toward that purpose.
I absolutely agree. This is the case with contemporary artists in Japan, male or female, in different media, whether it's ceramics, bamboo, metalwork, that once they have a major presence in the US through an exhibition or an acquisition, it's easier for them to gain acceptance back home. Yeah. So thank you all for your questions. And Carol and Jeffrey have generously agreed to spend some time now in the exhibition if you have any further questions. So we can all move over there. Thank you so much for coming out today.